and welcome everyone to today's session, which is part 2 of our lesson on phrasal verbs, everyone's favorite topic. So I'm going to start with a quick recap of part 1, which we did 2 weeks ago, and then talk about separable and inseparable phrasal verbs before talking a little bit about usage as well. So let's do our recap first. In part 1, we realized that there are actually 3 types of verbs with prepositions. One is called prepositional verbs, and that's when the preposition is connected to the object of the verb and doesn't affect its meaning. Now, with prepositional verbs, if you forget the preposition or use the wrong one, we can still understand you. So my example last time was, he came to my lecture yesterday. And if you just say, he came my lecture, we can still understand you. Other examples of prepositional verbs we looked at were listen to, look at, laugh at, and ask for. And one thing that I mentioned to you about pronunciation was that with prepositional verbs, we stress the verb. He came to my lecture yesterday. Then we looked at phrasal verbs, and here the preposition, which is also called a particle, is closely connected to the verb and changes its meaning. In this case, if you forget the preposition or use the wrong one, we can no longer understand you. So, for example, came to is also a phrasal verb to mean regain consciousness. And if we just say he came quickly after his surgery, we have lost the meaning. It's he came to quickly after his surgery. And for example, you can have 4 different phrasal verbs with just one verb, look. Each time the meaning is different. Look up, look after, look into, look out. These are phrasal verbs. And the important point about the pronunciation of phrasal verbs is that the stress is on the preposition. He came to quickly after his surgery. And we also discovered that there's a 3rd type that's called phrasal prepositional, and this is a phrasal verb that has a 2nd preposition. Now, the 2nd preposition may or may not create a new meaning. For example, if I say, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, if we drop to, again, it is a preposition, we can still understand you. But the other examples where we came up against, adding against creates a new phrasal verb, which means encounter. But come up with, adding with, creates another phrasal verb, which is suggest. And the pronunciation here, again, is we stress the first preposition. For example, we came up against a problem. So, one last thing I mentioned last week that we need to recap is that, like any other vocabulary item, one phrasal verb may have different meanings. For example, she has brought up, we can also say, which means here raised her son well. But if we say she has brought up this subject a few times, now here, bring up means to mention. And the other way around, different phrasal verbs may have the same meaning. For example, could you turn on or switch on the TV, please? Same idea. He didn't turn up or show up for the meeting. Same idea. Right, that's the recap of what we learned in part 1. Let's now look at separable and inseparable phrasal verbs. We're going more into grammar rather than vocabulary and meaning. So, the question is, can the preposition or prepositions be separated from the verb by the direct object of the verb? For 2 types of the 3 types we've just looked at, the answer is simple. With prepositional verbs, no, you cannot separate the verb from its, or the preposition from its direct object. So it's, have you looked at the figures? We can never say, have you looked the figures at? That's nice and straightforward. Also, with phrasal prepositional verbs, no, we cannot separate the verb from its 2 prepositions. It's, I can't put up with this noise. We will never say, I can't put this noise up with. And you can, you know, that just doesn't sound right. So for 2 types, The answer is clear and straightforward. So this question about can we separate the verb from its preposition only relates to phrasal verbs, right? Now, but first we have to identify the two subtypes of phrasal verbs. We have transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs. So intransitive phrasal verbs are those that don't need an object. For example, if I say, I usually get up at 7, there's no object in this sentence. But if I say they've turned down our offer, now this is a transitive phrasal verb. It needs an object, and now the question comes up. So can we now separate the verb from the preposition with the direct object? Now, the answer is not straightforward, I'm afraid. The answer is sometimes yes and sometimes no. For example, with the verb we've just seen, they've turned down our offer. Yes, we can separate and say they've turned our offer down. But with another phrasal verb, for example, deal with, he's dealt with the problem, we can't. We can't say he's dealt the problem with. And unfortunately, there are no rules that determine whether a phrasal verb is separable or not. Once again, you develop a feeling for this through regular exposure to correct language. Having said that, I've got a little trick, a little tip, if you really want to decide for yourself. If a phrasal verb is inseparable, you can ask a question with what, ask a what question, and then answer it with just the preposition. And if this sounds okay, this is an inseparable phrasal verb. For example, if you ask the question, what has he dealt with? And you answer, with the problem, it still sounds okay. It can be a very natural thing to say. But if it doesn't sound okay, for example, if you say, what have they turned down? And you answer, down our offer, it just doesn't sound right. And now you know that this is a separable phrasal verb. It's a little tip, you don't need to apply it, but just so you know. Right. So, last thing to mention about separable and inseparable phrasal verbs is with separable phrasal verbs, when the direct object is a noun, you have a choice. So as you have seen, you can say they've turned down our offer or they've turned our offer down. However, if you replace your noun, our offer, with a pronoun, you have no choice. You must put the pronoun between the verb and the preposition. So, question, have they turned down your offer? You have to say, yes, they've turned it down. You cannot say, they've turned down it. Again, I think your ears tell you that this doesn't sound right. It's all about exposure to correct language and developing a feeling. So I'd like to finish by talking a little bit about usage of phrasal verbs. In the last session, I told you, I recommended to you that you should study phrasal verbs like any other vocabulary item, i.e., study them in context, not from lists with translations. Avoid learning too many new ones at the same time because they're complicated. Revise them regularly. And I also mentioned that you shouldn't rush into using them. You shouldn't force yourself to try and use them. I'd like to expand on this point a little bit because a question that was asked, a very valid and common question was, but can we communicate well without using them? And the answer is absolutely, you can. While it's true that phrasal verbs are less formal and more common in informal daily exchanges, and non-phrasal verbs are more frequently used in formal situations and writing, the difference in formality is small, right? You shouldn't make a big thing of it. It's not accurate to say that a native speaker will never use the word decline when they speak and will never use the phrasal verb turn down when they write. This is inaccurate. So please stop worrying about sounding formal if you don't use phrasal verbs. It's better to sound a little formal than use the wrong phrasal verb and confuse your listener. That's a very important piece of advice that I give all my students. Now, when there is a common one-word non-phrasal synonym, natives would use both with the same frequency. So a native speaker may one day say, I was raised in Belgium, non-phrasal, and another day say, I was brought up in Belgium, phrasal. There's no difference. Only when there isn't a one-word non-phrasal synonym do natives usually use the phrasal verb, because it's simpler, it's easier, it's shorter. For example, you will not hear a native speaker say, I left my bed at 8 this morning, because there is a perfectly good phrasal verb, I got up at 8 this morning. And you won't hear a native speaker say, I registered my arrival at my hotel. No, they will use the phrasal synonym, I checked into my hotel. Shorter and easier. And you can be sure that these particular verbs that have no one-word non-phrasal synonym are already active in your own speech. Why? Because you will have heard and seen them very frequently. Examples are look for, get on or off public transport, pick up someone, drop off, come across. So don't worry, the ones that are important you will pick up through exposure. So, last question then, okay, if they're not that important, then we can use non-phrasal synonyms. Should we stop studying them? Absolutely not, because that will affect very badly your listening comprehension. Studying them is vital for improving your listening comprehension because native speakers do use them. Once your listening comprehension improves, this allows you to catch them in new contexts regularly, and this reinforces your understanding, and then little by little, they naturally become part of your active vocabulary. So, no stress, study them in a relaxed manner, and expose yourself to correct language. Now, obviously, phrasal verbs take longer than non-phrasal verbs to become active, so you need to be persistent, but also patient. Right, that's the end of part 2 of our lesson on phrasal verbs. I hope it's been helpful to you. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. For more on this topic, click here. Remember to also check out my complete online course, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching and happy studies!